I never thought a simple conversation over leftover pizza in our tiny, cluttered apartment would turn my whole world upside down. But there we were, me, slouched on the couch in my ratty old sweatshirt, and my roommate, Jake, nervously fiddling with his phone like he was about to confess some deep, dark secret. Honestly, I thought he was just going to ask if the landlord had fixed the heater yet, or maybe complain about the neighbor's dog again. Instead, he looked up, swallowed hard, and said, "Hey man, I've been thinking. I'm kind of curious." That was the moment I realized this was going somewhere way beyond our usual roommate banter. Let me backtrack a bit. Jake and I have been sharing this tiny two-bedroom in the city for about 6 months now. We met during orientation week at work. He's the graphic designer, I'm the copywriter, and we hit it off right away because, well, we're both pretty chill and love bad movies and good beer. Our place isn't much. Cramped kitchen that doubles as his art studio, a living room where my laptop usually lives, and walls lined with his crazy colorful prints. But it's home, and for the most part, sharing it has been easy. Jake's the kind of guy who's always been a bit reserved, quiet but sharp. Not the loud, outgoing type you'd expect to just blurt something like that out, which is why when he finally said, "I'm kind of curious," I nearly choked on my slice. Curiosity about what? I joked before about how he's always curious about everything. Food, music, weird documentaries. But this felt different. There was a weird vulnerability in his voice I hadn't heard before. I asked him what he meant, trying to keep my voice casual, but inside, my brain was racing. Was he talking about trying new hobbies? Or worse, did this mean he was about to drop some personal bombshell? We sat there for a beat, the hum of the city outside, muffling the silence between us. Then he shrugged, looked down, and said, "I guess I'm curious about what it's like for you. Like, I've never really been with a guy before, and I don't know if it's just me, or if that's something I want to figure out." For a moment, I felt like the floor had shifted under me. I mean, Jake? My roommate, the guy who borrows my coffee mugs and leaves his socks everywhere, telling me he might be into guys? I hadn't seen that coming at all. We'd always joked about being the straightest gay bros in the office, but now, suddenly, that line felt more blurry than ever. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be supportive, sure, but also didn't want to freak him out. So I just nodded and told him, "Hey, whatever you're feeling is okay. I'm here." And that's when something changed, not just between us, but inside me too. Because suddenly the idea of us trying to figure this out together felt less weird and a little more exciting? Scary? I wasn't sure yet. But one thing was clear. Things were about to get a lot more complicated. And honestly, I didn't expect any of this to start on a random Tuesday night, over cold pizza and the dim glow of my phone screen. But life's funny that way, right? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, someone drops a curveball, and suddenly, everything feels new again. After I told Jake I was here for him, there was this quiet moment where I honestly thought he might get up and walk away, like he'd just said too much. But instead, he sighed, leaned back on the couch, and stared at the ceiling like he was trying to map out his thoughts. That's when I noticed the tension in his shoulders. He looked vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before, and suddenly all the jokes and casual chats we'd had felt like a thin mask over something deeper. "So, what made you start thinking about this now?" I finally asked, trying to keep my voice low, like the walls themselves might be listening. Jake shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know, I guess. I've always kind of pushed it down, you know? Like, telling myself, nah, that's not you." But then the other day, I caught myself staring at this guy on the subway. Not in a creepy way, just noticing him. And it felt different. Like, it wasn't just random. It hit me then how little I really knew about what was going on inside my roommate's head. I mean, Jake and I shared a lot. Beer runs, dumb memes, weekend plans. But this was something real and raw. "Have you ever dated anyone before?" I asked, curious but careful. "No," he said with a small laugh, which sounded more nervous than amused. Not seriously. I mean, I had some flings back in college, but nothing that felt right. Or maybe I wasn't right for it. I don't know. He looked at me then, eyes searching like he was hoping I'd have some magic answer. Honestly, I didn't. But I did have something better. a sense that whatever this was, he wasn't alone in it. "You want to try talking about it?" I offered. "I mean, no pressure or anything, but if you want, I'm here." Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I do. But it's just weird. I don't want to mess things up between us." That hit me hard because I'd been juggling the same fears. Our friendship was solid, and the last thing I wanted was some awkwardness creeping in. But then again, maybe being honest was the only way forward. "Look, Jake, if this changes anything, it'll be 'cause we let it. But I'm not about to bail on you just 'cause you're trying to figure stuff out." He smiled, small but real, and it felt like a little door had just opened. Maybe this was the start of something neither of us expected. The next few days were interesting, to say the least. There was this subtle shift in how we interacted. We still bickered over the thermostat settings and who'd do the dishes, but there was an undercurrent of something new, like we were both holding back, waiting to see what would happen next. One night, after a long day at work, Jake pulled me aside while I was halfway through a dumb TV show. "Hey," he said, voice quieter than usual. "Can we talk? Like really talk?" I turned off the TV and nodded. We settled into the living room, the city lights flickering through the window. Jake took a deep breath and said, "I've been thinking a lot about what I want, who I am, and I realized I don't just want to be curious anymore. I want to explore, but I don't know where to start." I felt my heart race a bit because part of me wanted to jump in and say, "Hey, I'm here, let's figure it out together." But I also knew this had to be his journey to own. "Exploring's scary," I said honestly, "but it's also kinda exciting. And you don't have to do it alone." He looked relieved, like I'd given him permission to be himself. That night, we stayed up talking about everything, about fears, hopes, and the weird feelings that come with stepping into unknown territory. I shared some of my own experiences, how confusing it was at first, but how liberating it felt once I stopped pretending. Jake listened intently, asking questions, and for the first time, I saw him let go of some of that guardedness. A few days later, Jake asked if I wanted to join him for a drink at this little queer bar downtown. I was surprised, but also felt like I was part of something bigger, like we were both opening doors to new possibilities. The bar was dim and packed, with music that vibrated through the floor and people laughing like they belonged. Jake looked around, his usual reserved self melting away bit by bit. We talked to some folks, danced awkwardly, and even shared a few shy glances that weren't about work or roommates anymore. By the end of the night, as we walked back to our apartment under the neon glow of streetlights, Jake reached over and grabbed my hand. It was tentative, like he wasn't sure if I'd pull away. But I didn't. I squeezed his hand back and smiled. "Curious, huh?" I teased lightly. He laughed, and for a moment, everything felt right. I still don't know where this is going exactly. Maybe we're just two guys trying to figure things out in a city full of questions. But whatever happens, I'm glad we took this first step, because sometimes the best things start with a little curiosity and a lot of courage. That night, walking home with Jake's hand in mine felt like stepping into a new world I hadn't realized I wanted to explore. The city hum buzzed around us, but for once, it didn't feel overwhelming or lonely. It felt like we were navigating it together, even if neither of us had a map. The days after that went by in this weird blur of excitement and awkwardness. We'd always had this easy rhythm as roommates, but now there was this unspoken tension, like we were both asking ourselves, is this just friendship or something more? Sometimes I'd catch Jake watching me out of the corner of his eye, and I wasn't sure if it was curiosity or something deeper. And honestly, I was curious too, but I was trying to be patient, not wanting to rush or freak him out. One morning, I found Jake in the kitchen, making coffee, a rare sight because he usually just grabbed a cup and bounced out the door. But he was there, quietly humming to himself, and when he saw me, he smiled that easy smile of his, the one that always made me feel like everything was going to be okay. "Morning," he said, handing me a cup. "Morning," I replied, taking it. The warmth of the mug felt like a lifeline. We sat down at the tiny kitchen table, too small for the two of us, but somehow comforting, and for a minute, neither of us said anything. Then Jake cleared his throat and said, "I've been thinking about what you said the other night. about exploring, and I think I want to try. Like, really try. I nodded slowly, heart pounding because this wasn't just talk anymore. I'm here for you, Jake. No matter what. He looked down at his cup, then back at me. I don't want things to get weird between us. I value what we have, but I also don't want to ignore this part of me. Me too, I said. Maybe we can figure it out together. That afternoon, we decided to take a walk in the park near our place, somewhere less crowded, where we could talk without feeling like we were on display. The city noise faded into the background, replaced by the rustle of leaves and distant laughter of kids playing. As we strolled, Jake finally opened up more about his feelings, the confusion, the fear of judgment, the relief of admitting it out loud. I shared my own stories, the early days of accepting myself, the stumbles and the small victories. It was like peeling back layers, revealing the parts we'd both kept hidden for too long. By the time the sun started dipping below the skyline, we found ourselves sitting on a bench, shoulders almost touching. Jake looked over at me, eyes serious but soft. Do you think we could, I don't know, see where this goes? Us? I hesitated for a second, then smiled. Yeah, I think I'd like that. He laughed, a little breathless, and reached out to take my hand again, not the tentative way from before, but with a quiet confidence. I felt this spark, something new and alive, and it scared me how much I wanted to see where this path led. The next few weeks felt like stepping into a movie I hadn't auditioned for but couldn't stop watching. We started spending more time together outside the apartment, grabbing coffee, checking out art galleries, even going to that queer bar again, where the music and lights felt like a secret world just for us. There were awkward moments, sure, like the time we accidentally brushed hands while grabbing a book at the store, and both of us froze for a second too long. Or that night when I caught Jake staring at me in the dark and asked if everything was okay. And he just nodded but looked nervous. But those moments only made the good ones feel more real. One evening, we were back at the apartment, cooking dinner together. A disaster of burnt garlic bread and undercooked pasta, but we laughed through it all. Jake was humming something off-key, and I caught myself watching him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his hand reached for mine across the counter. Without thinking, I took his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed it gently. Hey, I said, heart racing. Mind if I ask something? Sure, he replied, eyes curious. What are you hoping for? From all this? Jake looked thoughtful, then shrugged. I guess I just want to know what it feels like. To be with someone who gets me. And maybe, if I'm lucky, to find something real. I nodded, feeling this warmth spread through me. Me too. That night, as we sat on the couch watching some dumb comedy, Jake leaned his head on my shoulder. It was the kind of small, quiet gesture that spoke volumes. And I realized that whatever happened, whatever this was turning into, we were both willing to take the risk. But just when I thought things might settle into something steady, there was that flicker of doubt I couldn't shake, the question of what came next. How do you go from roommates to something more without everything unraveling? What if one of us wanted to stop? Or what if this curiosity turned into something complicated? I wasn't sure yet, but for now, holding Jake's hand felt like the answer. And that was enough to keep me moving forward, one uncertain, thrilling step at a time. A few days after that night on the couch, things between Jake and me settled into this delicate new pattern. We were no longer just roommates. That much was clear. There were subtle changes, little touches that lingered longer than they used to, inside jokes that had a different kind of meaning now, and a shared glint in our eyes when we caught each other's gaze across the room. But we were still figuring it out, trying not to rush or force anything. One Saturday, Jake invited me out for brunch at this cozy cafe, a couple blocks from our place. It was the kind of spot with mismatched furniture, low lighting, and the smell of fresh coffee that made you feel like you'd stumbled on a secret. We grabbed a corner table and ordered way too much food. Pancakes, eggs, and an absurd amount of bacon, because neither of us is really a health nut. As we waited for our plates, Jake got quiet for a moment, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. I could tell something was on his mind. Hey, is everything okay? I asked, trying to sound casual but honest. He took a deep breath. Yeah, it's just, I've been thinking a lot about us. like where this is headed. I don't want to mess up what we have, but I'm also starting to feel more, and that's kind of scary. I nodded, feeling that familiar rush of nerves mixed with excitement. Yeah, I get that. I'm feeling the same way. It's new, and I don't have all the answers, but I want to see where this goes. He smiled, relief washing over his face. Good, because I was worried I was the only one. Our food arrived then, and for a moment, we just ate, savoring the quiet comfort of being with someone who understood the weird jumble of emotions swirling between us. After brunch, we wandered around the neighborhood, stopping to browse in a tiny bookstore. Jake picked up a novel and flipped through it, then looked at me with that shy smile again. You know, I never thought I'd be here. Like, actually exploring this part of myself with someone I live with. It's kind of surreal. I laughed. Yeah, life does have a way of surprising you. But I'm glad it's you. He blushed, and for a second, the air between us felt electric. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Do you want to come back to my place later? I mean, I feel like we're at that point where, well, maybe we should figure out what's next." My heart jumped. This was the moment, the one that had been hovering just out of reach. I nodded, trying to keep my cool, even though inside I was a mess of excitement and nerves. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. When we got back to the apartment, the familiar space felt different, charged with possibility. Jake closed the door behind us and turned to face me, his eyes searching mine like he needed reassurance. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. I stepped closer and took his hand. "I've never been more sure about anything." That night wasn't perfect. There were stumbles and awkward pauses, moments where we laughed at how clumsy we both were navigating this new territory. But it was honest, and it was real. We took our time, learning each other in ways that went beyond words or touches. There was a comfort in vulnerability, in knowing that neither of us had to pretend. Afterward, we lay side by side, the city lights casting a soft glow through the window. Jake looked over at me and whispered, "Thank you. For being patient, for understanding." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for trusting me." But even as we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the undercurrent of worry. How would this change things day to day? Would we still be able to share a living space without tension? Could we actually make this work? The next morning, over coffee, Jake broke the silence. "I guess we should talk about boundaries, you know? Like, what we're comfortable with, what we want from this." I agreed. It was important to keep communication open. We spent the day hashing out what we needed. Personal space, time to ourselves, and honest check-ins to make sure we were on the same page. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when jealousy crept in, or when insecurities flared up. But each time, we talked it out, learning not just about each other, but about ourselves. One evening, a couple weeks later, Jake surprised me by cooking dinner. The kitchen smelled amazing, and he looked nervous but determined. "I thought maybe I could try making your favorite," he said, grinning. We ate, laughed, and shared stories late into the night, the apartment feeling warmer somehow. I realized then that this us wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about building something real, something worth the risk. Looking back, I never expected my roommate's simple admission of curiosity to lead here. But sometimes, the best things start with a question, a shared moment, and the courage to say, "I don't know, but let's find out together." After that night when Jake cooked dinner, something shifted between us that was hard to put into words. It wasn't like we suddenly became this perfect couple overnight, far from it. But there was a new layer of comfort, like we'd crossed a threshold from tentative exploration into something more grounded, more real. The days that followed felt like a careful dance. We were still roommates who bickered about noisy neighbors and whose turn it was to take out the trash. But underneath all that, there was this quiet understanding that we were now sharing more than just a living space. One evening, about a week later, I was sprawled on the couch, working on some writing for a project, when Jake came in from the back room, looking a little hesitant. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Can we talk for a minute?" I set my laptop aside and nodded, patting the seat next to me. He sat down, fiddling with the hem of his shirt like he always does when he's nervous. So I've been thinking a lot about us, about what this means. I smiled, encouraging him to keep going. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't want to just be curious anymore. I want to know if this could actually be something real, something more than just figuring things out. My heart thumped a little faster. Yeah, I feel the same way. Jake looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. Good, because I was kind of scared to say it out loud. We sat there for a moment, the quiet between us no longer awkward but full of possibility. Do you think we're ready to tell people? Like, friends or family? Jake asked suddenly. I hesitated. It hadn't crossed my mind much yet. I mean, our circle was small, and I wasn't sure how everyone would react, especially since this all happened so fast. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe not just yet. I think we need to figure out what this means for us first. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, that makes sense. A few days later, we found ourselves at a small gathering with some coworkers. Jake and I arrived together, and for the first time since we started this, there was an unspoken question hanging over us. Are we going to act like we're just roommates, or something more? The night was a mix of laughter, bad jokes, and clumsy attempts at flirting from a couple of friends who clearly hadn't caught on. At one point, Jake leaned over and whispered, "You want to just tell them? Like, be out about us?" I looked around, then back at him. Yeah, you know what? Let's do it. So when someone made a joke about roommates stealing each other's food, Jake shot me a look and said, well, yeah, but we're more than roommates. We're together. There was a pause, then a few smiles, some raised eyebrows, but mostly support. It felt like a small victory. Afterwards, walking home hand in hand, Jake squeezed my fingers and said, that felt good. Yeah, I agreed. It feels good to stop hiding. But with that openness came new challenges. We had to navigate how to balance our personal lives with our shared space, how to keep things from suffocating us. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find Jake already up, sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Morning, I said, stretching. Morning, he replied, motioning for me to join him. As I sat down, he looked up and said, I was thinking maybe we should take a weekend trip. Just the two of us. I raised an eyebrow. Where to? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can just be us. The idea sounded incredible. A break from the city, from the noise, from the constant hustle. A chance to see where this could go without distractions. We spent the next hour tossing around ideas and booking a small cabin a couple hours outside town. That weekend, driving out of the city with Jake beside me, the world seemed to slow down. The trees blurred past. The air smelled different, fresher. When we arrived, the cabin was cozy. A little rustic, but charming, with a porch that looked out onto a dense forest. We spent our days hiking, cooking simple meals, and talking about everything and nothing. It was the kind of time that lets you peel back all the layers. One night, sitting on the porch under a blanket of stars, Jake turned to me and said, I think this is the first time I've ever felt truly. Myself, I reached over and took his hand in mine. Me too. There was a pause. Then he leaned in slowly, his lips brushing mine gently. It was soft and tentative, but filled with all the hope and uncertainty we'd been carrying. When we pulled back, Jake smiled shyly. I don't want to rush anything. Neither do I said. But I want to take this step with you. That weekend away was a turning point. We came back to the city feeling more connected, more sure. But reality was waiting. The bills, the jobs, the everyday pressures. Still, every time I looked at Jake, I felt grateful. We were navigating something new and fragile, but also beautiful. One night, a few weeks after the trip, we were lying in bed when Jake said quietly, do you ever wonder what it would have been like if we met earlier? Like in college or right after? I thought about it. Sometimes, but maybe the timing wasn't right. Maybe we had to get here, to this moment, for it to work. He nodded, resting his head on my chest. Yeah, I'm just glad we're here now. And honestly, so was I. Those quiet moments in bed, with Jake's head resting on my chest, felt like the calm before the next storm, though I had no idea what kind of storm that would be. I was still riding this thrilling high of feeling close and connected, but deep down, I knew that the world outside our apartment walls didn't always make things easy for people like us, starting something new. A week after our cabin trip, I got a text from my sister. She was coming to town for the weekend and wanted to meet up. I told Jake about it, and he was supportive but a little quiet when I mentioned that my family didn't know about us yet. It wasn't a secret exactly. It just wasn't something I'd brought up. My family was great, but I hadn't exactly come out with the whole, "Hey, my roommate and I are more than roommates" speech. The day my sister arrived, I was a ball of nerves. Jake was cool as ever, which made me a little more chilled, but still, the thought of introducing this to my family felt like stepping onto a tightrope without a net. That evening, my sister and I grabbed drinks at a local bar, Jake tagging along. The three of us sat in a corner booth, the conversation flowing easily, but the question hanging in the air was unspoken. When do I tell her? Jake was surprisingly chill, cracking jokes with my sister as if they'd been friends forever. I envied his ease. Finally, near the end of the night, I took a breath and said, "So Jake and I, we're kind of more than roommates." My sister blinked, then smiled. "About time you told me. I thought you guys were just really close." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, it's new." Jake reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. It was the little gesture that made me feel grounded. "I'm happy for you guys," she said, and that was all the acceptance I needed. That night, walking home with Jake, I felt lighter. Like, finally, a piece of my life wasn't hiding in the shadows. But just when things seemed to be falling into place, work got complicated. Our company announced layoffs, and suddenly both Jake and I were nervously watching job postings. The apartment, our little sanctuary, started to feel more fragile. Stress and uncertainty seeped into our conversations, and late-night talks became filled with worries about money and the future. One night, after a long day of interviews for Jake, we sat on the couch in silence. I could tell he was beating himself up. "Hey," I said gently, "you did your best. That's all anyone can ask." He shook his head. "I just hate feeling stuck, like I'm not moving forward." I pulled him close, feeling the tension in his body. "We'll get through this, together." It was moments like those that reminded me how much more there was to this relationship than just attraction or curiosity. It was about support, about being there when things got messy. The following weekend, we decided to have a date night at home, just to remind ourselves why this was worth fighting for. We ordered takeout, put on some old records, and danced around the living room like idiots. Jake was laughing so hard that tears welled up in his eyes, and I felt a swell of love I hadn't known I had. But even in the joy, I caught myself worrying about what came next. How do you build a future when everything feels so uncertain? How do you keep someone you care about when the world seems set on pulling you apart? One evening, as we lay tangled in bed, Jake looked over at me and said, "Do you think we're ready for the next step? Moving in together, officially, or maybe even just making this real in the eyes of the world?" I stared at the ceiling, considering. "I want that, but I'm scared too." "It's a big step." He nodded, his hand tracing lazy circles on my arm. "Yeah, me too. But maybe that's part of it, taking the leap, even if we don't know exactly where we'll land." I smiled, feeling that familiar spark of hope. "Then let's figure it out together." In the weeks that followed, we started talking about what moving in together would really mean. Finances, boundaries, the little things that make or break shared living. It wasn't all sunshine and roses, but it was real, and it was ours. One rainy Saturday, we went apartment hunting. The city was soggy, streets slick with water, but inside each place, I felt sparks of possibility. We'd walk through rooms, imagining our lives unfolding there. Jake's art supplies in the corner, my bookshelves lining the walls, us cooking dinner in a kitchen that wasn't too small to share. After a few places, we found one that felt right. Small, but cozy, with big windows that let in light even on the gloomiest days. It didn't have the character of our old place, but it had space. Space to grow. Signing the lease felt like a promise to ourselves and each other that we were in this for the long haul. That night, back at our old apartment, Jake pulled me into a hug and whispered, "We're really doing this." And I believed him. Because even with all the uncertainty, all the fear, and all the unknown ahead, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to face it without him. Moving into the new apartment was a mix of chaos and quiet moments. Boxes piled high in the corners, mismatched furniture slowly finding its place, and little rituals that began to feel like home. Unpacking Jake's art supplies next to my cluttered desk, sharing takeout on the floor because the table wasn't set up yet, and falling asleep tangled up in the new sheets, both of us still a little nervous but mostly grateful. One evening, a few weeks after we'd settled in, we found ourselves sitting on the windowsill, watching the city lights blink on as dusk settled. The hum of traffic below was comforting in its familiarity, a soft soundtrack to the kind of peace I hadn't realized I was craving. Jake nudged me gently. "You ever think about how far we've come? From that awkward pizza night to this?" I smiled, squeezing his hand. "All the time. It's crazy. I never expected us to end up here." He laughed softly. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did." There was a softness between us then, a quiet acknowledgement of everything we'd navigated, the fears, the doubts, the awkward first steps, and how those moments had built something real. Not perfect, but ours. I thought about how Jake's simple admission of curiosity had opened a door neither of us knew was there, how it had pushed us to be honest, vulnerable, and patient with each other and ourselves, and how, through it all, we found not just love, but friendship in its truest form. "Hey," I said, turning to look at him, "thank you for trusting me, for taking a chance." He looked at me, eyes warm, but a little shy. "I should be the one thanking you. For being there, for making us feel safe." We stayed like that for a while, hands intertwined, just existing in the quiet comfort of the moment. No big declarations, no dramatic confessions, just two people who had chosen each other, imperfections and all. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Jake whispered, "Whatever happens next, I'm glad it's with you." And honestly, I couldn't have asked for anything more, because sometimes the best kind of love isn't fireworks or grand gestures. It's the steady, gentle kind, the kind that grows in the quiet spaces between the chaos, the kind that makes you feel seen, safe, and a little less alone. That's what we found. Not a perfect story, but a real one. And for me, that was everything.